Hi everybody, I'm Delegate Chris Head with this week's update from Richmond. Well, today was crossover. That's the day that all bills have to be completed in their house of origin and then cross over to the other house. So from this point forward, we'll be dealing only with Senate bills that passed, and the Senate will only be dealing with the House bills that passed. But since today was crossover day, yesterday was an extremely long day. Typically, it's one of the two longest days on the floor of the House. The reason for this is that all of the remaining House bills, with the exception of the budget, have to be on second reading when they're presented with an opportunity for debate on the floor by the end of the day. That way we can move them to third reading, which is when we actually take the final vote. We had a little over 1,000 bills introduced in this session, and 181 of them were remaining for second reading yesterday. Now, usually we caucus 30 minutes to an hour before session and then begin the floor session at noon. But because of the volume of the bills that we had, we went into session yesterday at 10 a.m. and then we were on the floor until we adjourned last night at about 7:30. There were several interesting things on the calendar yesterday. One of the most interesting and controversial was House Bill 1900, which dealt with hunting with dogs. As I walked into the Capitol about 8:45 yesterday morning, I was met by more than 150 hunters in camouflage wear and blaze orange hats. Suffice it to say, the hunting community of the Commonwealth is very much against this bill. It was by a razor-thin margin, but the bill failed to pass. And while I know that there are some problems and bad actors in the Commonwealth that need to be addressed regarding hunting with dogs, I don't think this bill got us where we needed to be and ultimately might have had some negative consequences. So I was one of those no votes. My friend Matt Ferris, a delegate from Campbell County, made a floor speech in opposition to the bill last Friday that was really very funny, but also very informative about what he saw as the problem with it. So if you get a chance, take a look at that. Now today, we voted on House Bill 2108, the Broadband Authority Bill. Now I mentioned this bill in my week 1 video and said then that it would probably change substantially as it moved through the process. Well, boy was I right. In its final form, it really doesn't do a lot. It's only about transparency, and it subjects broadband authorities to certain elements of the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, which should make it easier for the citizens that it serves to make certain it's financially stable and is well managed. I expect when it comes back from the Senate that it'll be in a form that I'll vote for it. Now, late in the evening, one of the last 3 pieces that we handled yesterday was my House Joint Resolution 545. That's a constitutional amendment that would grant the legislature the authority to spend any administrative rule or regulation with a majority vote of both the House and the Senate. Every regulation that we have is based on some sort of legislative authority, but often those regulations don't follow the intent of the legislation. And sometimes bureaucrats just don't like the law and they choose to delay taking action and continue to do things the way they always have, basically ignoring the law of the Commonwealth. Well, I think that's a problem because bureaucracies aren't elected. And we're in the General Assembly, and we are, and that means that we're held accountable to you, the voters, every time we have an election. Well, this proposed constitutional amendment would allow us to finally hold the regulators accountable. The resolution passed the House and is now headed to the Senate for action there. Amending the Constitution is really hard and complicated, and it should be. In order to do it, this resolution will have to pass with a majority of both houses. Then we have to have an election, which we will this year. And then it has to pass both houses in the exact same form again next year. And if it does, then it goes out onto the ballot in the next November election. And the final decision is up to you, the voters. Now that crossover is behind us, we basically start all over. So this week we'll be dealing only with Senate bills and committees, and there'll be very little activity on the floor. Because of that, my video next week is going to go over the status of the legislation that I'm carrying and an overview of the budget. As always, if you'd like to contact me about any of the legislation I'm carrying or that's being carried this year, or if you need help with a state agency, you can reach me during session by phone at 804-698-1017 or by email at delchead@house.virginia.gov. I'll have more for you next week or sooner if there's some big news. Until then, take care and God bless.